Welcome into Trucker Talk Radio. You're on Behind the Wheelhouse with J&J. I'm John. This is Justin. So here's the deal, folks. Freight doesn't move on trucks alone. A huge chunk of what ends up on a flatbed or in a dry van started its life sitting in a rail car somewhere, or it's headed to one. And rail has always been this kind of mysterious, old school corner of the freight world where you deal with the, phone calls, voicemails, things that we don't really see anymore, guys with a Rolodex from 1987. Our guest today is set out to drag that whole world into the modern age. Real quick, before we dig in, this show is brought to you by Ready App, ready-app.com. Be ready, be verified. Our guest today is Robert Skarzynski. I hope I said that right, Skarzynski. He's the founder and CEO of Standard Rail Corporation, based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Standard Rail started with a pretty simple vision: high quality, reliable rail services at competitive rates, with a focus on transparency. And then last year, they launched a platform called Sightings, which is essentially a B2B marketplace for rail. It connects shippers with certified rail facilities, covering storage, transloading, real estate, and railcar services. Think of it like a booking platform the rail world has never had. Robert, we appreciate you coming on. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. Great intro. You should do sales for us.
So let me get started, Robert. You're talking to a truck show crowd. We've only had a few guys from the rail side on. Take us to the beginning. You've said that you were living the problem back in 2017, chasing capacity for days, dealing with opaque pricing, while every other freight mode, trucking, ocean, air, had already gone digital. What was the moment you said, I've got to fix this?
Yeah, it seemed quite obvious to me that there's an opportunity, that there's no visibility in the space. So to your point, I was literally driving around the countryside looking for sidings. That's what our platform's called, which is just essentially the railroad where you can offload or load a rail car. So you couldn't find it. You couldn't ask your railroad for it. Nobody knew where anything was. You literally had to go out in the field. And I thought that was a missed opportunity, especially looking towards, ships, airplanes, trucks. There's a lot of connectivity. Rail was kind of this black hole that people didn't really understand. And if you look at a lot of the other technology companies in the supply chain, they kind of just don't even touch rail. And I could see why. It's extremely difficult and fragmented, and it's hard to make a system in it. So that was kind of the quest for us. This is our third time building the product, a couple failures, and now starting to really get it to click. We're starting to look more at this as being an operating system for rail. Like, rail is so hard to use, so hard to find, so hard to get rates. And I think that it's just an opportunity for new to rail shippers to use our platform, but as well as existing rail shippers to use our platform to help uncover things that they didn't know that was available to them in the marketplace. So we launched about 6 months ago. We're starting to see a lot of success. The platform is really starting to take off with more users. It's been quite the journey over the last 8 years or so.
So break it down for us. What does this platform really do?
I guess I'll bring it back like this. The hero of our platform is the rail car. And servicing a rail car, like if you want to ship by rail, you're going to run into rail cars. And 25 years ago, you would just ask the railroad for a rail car. Now you can still do that, but you might not get a rail car. You might have to go to the private market to get rail cars. So basically, the second that started to shift away from the railroads owning all the rail cars to private industries owning all the rail cars, the onus to maintain them, to regulation standards, the onus to store them, it fell on the shipper and the user. I recognize this that kind of there's a lot of TMSs, there's a lot of other platforms out there, but nobody's specifically trying to help the rail car through the system. So we've built an operating system that helps people store rail cars. It helps them transload, find transloading, and then all the workflows that surround transloading. Often with rail cars, you have to update, you physically touch them, but you also have to digitally touch them, right? So there's just a lot of moving parts, and our platform is just designed to just streamline it and make it just easy to ship by rail.
Hey drivers, our partners over at Zero Breeze have designed a no idle air conditioner for sleeper cabs and fleets that can pay for itself in just one summer. If you're spending up to $40 a night in fuel, it's time to stop idling and start saving. For $50 off, email sales@zerobreeze.com or text them at 945 247 1298. And don't forget to ask them about their extended warranty option. Check them out today at zerobreeze.com. As for the system, and here in the States, rail's always been big. I live very close to a huge rail outside of Memphis. They actually moved everything out of Memphis to into Mississippi, and it's like its own city. So, I mean, it's JB Hunt's got a big intermodal, section in there, and I mean, it's just going all the time. How many players are in it now? Is it is big? And then my other question is, we have a lot of container people here, and you brought up the cars. With containers, there's always fees attached. How long do you have them? Is that is it stored somewhere? Are there any type of fees like that in rail?
Exactly. If you leave the rail car on the railroad, they're going to charge you upwards of $200 a day, depending on where you're at. And if you have hundreds of cars, I mean, those are big bills. So typically, what people will do, they'll take them and put them into lower cost storage. Our platform, like intermodal, is easier. The bulk freight aspect of rail is a lot more difficult to track. So that's what we're really focusing on. We're not focusing on that intermodal piece. I know there's some people having success with that already. So we're just trying to make sense of the bulk side of things, so to speak.
Can you break that down a little bit for us, like for our listeners that are not familiar with rail or not even familiar with trucking? Break that down for what do you mean by bulk?
Yeah, so bulk would be like if you're shipping grain, you're shipping, probably your order sizes are 10,000 metric tons, and you need to move it across the country. Scrap steel, those types of commodities. There's a lot of chemical commodities, energy products that are shipped in big volumes, and rail is really suitable for that. The trucking comes in at the last mile, and that's where we really want to help is that facilitate the interaction between the long haul freight and the trucking piece and try to make that more visible and that easier to do.
Yeah, so we have a lot of truck drivers on here, and I'm sure a lot of question these owner operators or company drivers are thinking is the rail really my enemy or is it my friend? Intermodal's been eating into truckload share for a few years now, for quite a few years. Freightwaves had one piece earlier this year showing truckload spot rates holding up around 280 a mile, up 23% year over year, while intermodal rates were stuck near all-time lows, cycle lows. How do you see the trucking and rail relationship? Are they competition? Are they teammates? What do you see?
Yeah, it's just a different mode. Every commodity's got kind of a different journey that it needs to go on. I think with like last mile, trucking's going to dominate, but I think at that 300 to 500 mile range, that rail starts to get competitive. Again, it's hard to get on rail. Like it's hard to even get a rate for rail or get your company set up. With one of the class one railroads. So it's difficult there. But I personally think that if you can move more by rail, you can have more first mile, last mile deliveries by truck. They still need to be made, and that maybe there's competition in that long distance range where I think rail's probably going to win on price. And if you start looking at like the green side of things too, rail is extremely green compared to trucking. So it depends on some of these companies. That's really important to them, the ESG. Uh, that's maybe one of those areas in competition with trucking where rail can kind of excel. But I don't think you can move away from trucking. I think you might change the type of truck. And I'm not an expert on trucking. I spent all my time talking about rail cars. So yeah, I think that they work together to get the product to the end customer, and that the railroad isn't going to be able to deliver a single load easily, whereas trucking can split the load. It can do a lot of that customizable stuff and sort out that supply chain a lot better.
You're right. I've noticed here in the South of the United States, when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, every manufacturing company had rail that went into their facility of some sort. And as Some of the tracks have, dried up from, the smaller lines have went away and merged. You don't see any cars going into company, so you do have to have that truck. Could you tell our listeners that, like, that's not, used to rail, like, so this, let's say a 600-700 mile load, that's, 1 or 2 days for a truck. How long would that take on rail if everything was set up, for the cost difference to the time? Is there a
Oh yeah,
huge
like two
difference?
weeks. It depends on the lane. Yeah, you could be looking at 2 weeks. If you're shipping private cars, those cars have to return for another shipment. They're
Mhm.
coming back empty, so you're not utilizing that leg. So you could lose a car for a month on a haul. So typically it's just not going to work for the onesie, twosie shippers.
Mhm.
I think the rail system and what the railroads want. They want those big loop track, hook and haul. They're shipping hundreds of cars a week. That's called unit train shipping. And then there's this other category called manifest, which is kind of like people shipping 25 cars, blocks of 25, 5, 50. The railroads aren't as keen on that business. I think they're losing some of that business to trucking.
With the way everything is now, do you see, and I know we're probably going to get in this subject a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and bring it up. Everybody talks about AI. I think trucking side of it's going to get more regional. I could easily see where rail becomes a bigger player again. Maybe it makes it difficult because of getting the cars and stuff to haul the freight, but I could easily see where, rail could take advantage of that, and then you have that last mile being, a autonomous truck or just a small haulers. What do you think that'll play that way?
That's exactly where it's going. I mean, AI is a little bit of a different beast in the rail industry because there's just so many different systems. So you can't just let AI go, wild on the rail industry and come back with reliable information. Each railroad has hundreds of different systems. There's just no common language. So without the data being organized in a way, AI is not like going to change rail overnight. But what AI will do is improve a lot of the workflows in rail and smooth them out. There's a ton of inefficiencies in rail. So once those inefficiencies start to get smoothed out, once the data starts to get cleaned up, then you can see more AI come in there. But I think, to your point, that the trucking is just going to be the last mile. Some products will work for rail, some products won't work for rail. But the ones that do work for rail, you're going to move it as close as you can, either to the unloading facility or to a transload near the unloading facility. And then from there, you're taking 3 trucks out for every rail car, and you need to. There's really no other way to get it to market. So they work together, and transloads is a really a growing business in the space. So transloading, for those who don't know, is like when you move from rail car to truck or from truck to rail car. In fact, there's a lot of trucking companies that are looking into transloading. For example, if you're a trucking company that's moving a lot of fertilizer, maybe you want to bring some fertilizer in by rail to help grow your business that way. So, and you would do that not by buying a land and developing this giant, $100 million property you would just go to your local transload, you'd set up an arrangement with them, and then you'd be able to get, product into your market. You could get product out of your market. So I think they really work together. Like you're not going to be able to get product on rail without a truck in a lot of cases, and vice versa.
So with AI, we're talking more and more about freight fraud, and freight fraud is getting worse and worse. It's not getting better. Double brokering, people saying they're loading a truck and they really load it on rail and then it gets lost. That happened to me about
Yeah.
15 years ago. Um, so it keeps getting worse and worse. So with freight fraud and double brokering blowing up on the trucking side right now, where's rail in that mix? Is rail insulated from that? Is there a verification problem? How is rail dealing with fraud right now?
It's harder to take it out of steel product from Railcar. You can see that in LA had that issue where the containers were getting looted right on the Railcar. But I don't see it as rampant or as many opportunities for fraud in rail. With trucking, you see a lot of like fly by night operators kind of pop up from everything from brokers to carriers, etc. It's harder in rail to do that. So I don't see it as an issue. So like AI, you guys probably heard of like the gen logs, how that's helping with some of that tracking of freight that's being stolen. That problem might be a trucking problem. I think it might exist here and there in rail, but I haven't heard it's a major concern. Whereas in trucking, I hear about it all the time that it's causing a lot of problems.
Now, do y'all have a lot of those issues in Canada? Like even on I know you're not in trucking, but do you hear about it in Canada with the fraud, or is that
On
more
the
of a
trucking side.
yeah, or is
Yeah, in
that
Canada, it's more about like, are people maintaining their trucks, or are they gaming the system around regulations? That's a problem. I don't know if freight is being stolen. I imagine it also is, especially some of those bigger markets like Toronto. What's the difference between Toronto and the U.S.?
Hmm.
So I could see it happening out east. Out in Western Canada, I haven't heard that be a problem, but I'm sure it's coming. It's becoming one.
Are you guys doing a lot of business in the US right now? Or you
We're
got
primarily in Canada. So we launched our product 6 months ago. We brought in some venture capital, and we're expanding our marketing and our engineering. So we're really pushing into the US right now. But most of our business activities are in Canada at this time.
are there different players in Canada than there are? I mean, do you guys still have BNSF and JB Hunt working up there? Do you guys who are there some of the big Canadian players that are up there?
Yeah, so the two big class ones would be like CN Rail and CPKC are the two railroads up here. BNSF does come into Canada in the Winnipeg market and in Vancouver, and then you'll see like the main U.S. brands. They're all over North America. You'll see them coming through here. Canada's got a couple big like trucking outfits and stuff like that too. But when I go down to the U.S., it's there's a lot of brands that I see online and out there but that we're not seeing in Canada. So
does y'all's crazy winter weathers affect your business quite a bit? Because like I know
um,
it does in trucking, but
yeah,
I was curious with rail, how does it affect it?
yeah. For like our technology business, doesn't really necessarily affect us. We're a tech company, but for railroading in the winter, like it's extreme. One of the things I did before I started a business, I worked on a program called cold weather protection for CN Rail, which is Class One railroad. So these trains are their air brakes are powered, or their brakes are powered by air. And
Hmm.
air doesn't work as well in the winter, so they got to shorten trains. So when they're running 14,000-foot trains right now in the summer, in the winter they're shrinking down to 6,000. So you can imagine that impacts operations. And then it's hard to keep cars moving in winter. The class ones have done a lot of good work and innovation to make it easier to operate in winter, but it's a fight.
65 degrees for a high right now. It just makes me cold just thinking what it is in the winter. That's for sure. One thing I want to go back to that you were talking about, it's not really tech, but it's one of the problems you brought up, and we talk about problems on here all the time. You were talking about the cars and being a player. How does somebody get started? I mean, it seems like it's very difficult to get into that sector. Are there ways or ideals that maybe even your tech can help get somebody in to use it? Because I agree with you. Rail is a lot greener. It's harder to get in, I agree, but it's a lot easier to deal with because it's on there, you know it's going. Unless it has a major catastrophe on the rail, it's
Or
going to
get
get
stuck in
on time.
Chicago, or get
Yeah.
stuck in Chicago for 3 weeks.
Yeah, you really need to build a business case for rail. So a lot of people like, oh, there's a rail line, and oh, I could move it. But you have to really look at it. So what we've done with some customers is we walk them through kind of like is rail the right choice for you, and then qualifying it. And sometimes we say like, look, what you are thinking is possible is not actually possible. You'll never get those economics that you expect out of rail. You might as well stick with trucking. So I think that's kind of the first step is like figuring out, does rail even make sense? And then if rail makes sense, maybe doing some homework on the lanes, that type of information before you go to the class one. Because what a lot of people do wrong is they just go straight to the class one. I want to ship this many cars. I don't know anything about rail. They come off looking like they don't know anything about rail. And then the railroad just ignores them and they don't get any response. Like a lot of the feedback I have from trucking companies is they can't even get rates. They can't even get a response because the railroads are just, they're not going to spend their time working on an opportunity that isn't going to make sense for them. So the more homework that somebody can do in preparation before going to the railroad and making sure that the idea has some valid structure behind it, That becomes, I think, the most important. So we have a kind of a process that we've helped with. We haven't digitized that process. It's kind of there's a lot of touch points and a lot of communication that needs to be done to get those answers. But we help companies walk through that situation all the time, and then just give them a recommendation. Maybe stick with the trucks.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I mean, I wanted to get intermodal. I wanted to get into port work. I wanted to get into rail, and I was pretty much told to stay in my lane. And rail is extremely complex. I kind of like just reading about sightings. Number one, where did you come up with that name, sightings?
Siding is a rail siding.
Siding is where that's where the track where the cars get parked, right?
Exactly. So siding, sometimes called the spur, is just like a side. It depends where you're at. It's a side track. It can have a dead end. It can have switches on both ends. But typically, a siding in the actual definition is like a passing. There's a passing siding like on the railroad, so that trains can get around each other. Like that's another type of siding. But typically, like what you're always, my customers are looking for sidings. This is the terminology that they were using. Can you help me find a siding where I can store some cars, where I can transload some cars? So that's where that name came from. It just made sense. That's what we're bringing to light. We're bringing to light the sidings that you can transload from, that you can store on. We're doing we're identifying real estate where you can build on as well. So that's where the terminology came from.
You're really showing people how to use rail properly through this platform, right? You're showing them how to piece it all together, correct?
We're giving you more information where you can piece it together and get a bigger picture on the rail space. Like just a few years ago, you couldn't find anything anywhere, and the people that were providing directories were all putting them behind paywalls or gates so that you can access that information. I think like rail's biggest problem is it's super non-transparent. I think transparency is needed in this industry. So we wanted to create a platform where you could find the supplier, you could connect with the supplier, you could place an order directly with the supplier. There's a lot of procurement benefits with that as well, because it's hard to even get set up with transloads, hard to get set up with shippers, right? So just a singular point where people can kind of come to and learn about the rail space.
Do you think, because what you're describing was needed here in the United States bad, because I've always looked at rail as it's like the good boys club. You got to be in the clique, or they don't want you a part of it. Because first of all, it's kind of like sitting down at a blackjack table. If you don't know how to play blackjack, they don't want you sitting on either side of them because you're going to mess the cards up. And I always felt like that, and you've kind of brought that up as if you don't have your information right, you're not going to get in the door. And I know there's a lot of misconception about rail. I mean, I used to work for a company that leased trucks. They wouldn't touch it with the 10-foot pole, and they had over 400 trucks because they were just fees or anything to do with the rail. They just like, no, we don't want no part of it. And it's just like, well, and there was no way to learn, so I never really got to learn much about it. So I appreciate that part of it, and I think that would do well because there's so many questions that are truly unanswered. I know from colleagues and stuff.
It's super complicated, and even starting with rail, you ship a rail car, they're going to want you to pay net 15, right? And then your product's not even going to get there for 30 days, right? So like just from a cash flow perspective, like how do you manage that? That's why you need like a certain scale, I think, for rail to make sense. So I say if you guys had like, hey, I want to move X amount of tons annually from here to there, and it I think that's how you want to approach the railroads. Being hyper specific about exactly what commodity, what type of cars are you using, system cars, which are you borrowing from the railroad, or are you getting cars from the private market? Having all those pieces together is really the only way you're going to get on the rail.
So we've been speaking with Robert Skarzynski. He's truly, like it says on his LinkedIn page, he's revolutionizing rail logistics. He's got cutting edge technology. Tell us, Robert, where our listeners can find you You've already got a massive following on LinkedIn. It's quite impressive.
Impressive.
Tell them where they can find you and where they can get in touch with you, especially those carriers that may be listening that are like, hey, we need to take a look at sightings.
Yeah, check out the platform for free on standardrail.com. Sign up for a free account. You can explore, use more filters, get more information. We're welcoming trucking companies to our platform. We recognize that makes sense for you guys to have access to this information. So standardrail.com. If you want to connect with me directly, LinkedIn is the best place.
Robert, thank you for coming on again. We really appreciate it. Been a great conversation. For all those drivers listening, like, share, subscribe. We're available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube. Everybody drive safe out there, and have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gray Cross. Every day, professional drivers make sacrifices that most people never see. Long hours, missed holidays, time away from family, and the responsibility of keeping America's supply chain moving. Gray Cross was created to support those drivers and their families when life takes an unexpected turn. By providing assistance, resources, and support during the difficult times, Gray Cross helps strengthen the trucking community one family at a time. Because behind every truck is a driver. Behind every driver is a family counting on them. If you'd like to support the mission, visit graycross.org to learn more. Donations are always appreciated, but simply sharing their message with others in the industry can make a tremendous difference. Gray Cross, supporting the people who keep America moving. Today's episode is brought to you by ReadyApp. Trust is the one most valuable asset in transportation. That's why ReadyApp created Driver Verify. Driver Verify helps carriers, brokers, and transportation companies gain greater confidence through verified driver identities, professional credentials, work history, and onboarding visibility. Drivers can securely maintain CDL information, endorsements, certifications, and employment records all in one professional profile. As fraud continues to impact the transportation industry, verification has never been more important. ReadyApp, verified drivers, trusted freight. Go check them out at ready-app.com.